Princes are remembered for the alliances they keep and the ones they break. And right now, we're watching the Court of Europe go into open revolt against Donald Trump. What you're about to see isn't just a disagreement over policy. No, it's a fracture in the world order, and it's happening right now, in real time. So our story kicks off at the Munich Security Conference. But I don't want you to think of this as some stuffy meeting. I want you to think of it as a crime scene, where a critical alliance was just publicly broken. Everything was in place. The flags were all lined up. And the stakes, they were absolutely existential. Ukraine's survival, and, the entire future of mutual defense between America and Europe. This meeting was supposed to be a massive show of force, a clear, unified message to the entire world that the Western alliance was totally unbreakable, especially with Russia on the move. But the meeting just collapsed, and not because of some big fight or disagreement. No, it fell apart because a key American official, Marco Rubio, just didn't show up. There was no emergency, no last-minute illness. He was just gone. Look, in the cutthroat world of power politics, this isn't some simple mistake. It's a message. It's a deliberate act of power, basically screaming that Ukraine's defense is no longer a sacred promise. So while that insult is just hanging in the air, inside the main conference hall, a quiet rebellion suddenly becomes a very loud, very open confrontation. Estonia's Prime Minister Kaja Kallas gets right in the face of Mike Waltz, an official from Donald Trump's inner circle. And believe me, she did not hold back. Her message was brutally simple. When America goes to war, Europe bleeds right alongside you. But if America decides to stand alone, well, it's gonna fall alone. You have to understand, this wasn't a debate. It was a warning. The kind of warning that tells you a fundamental break has already happened. And this wasn't just Kaja Kallas' personal opinion. Oh no, the conference's own official report dropped an absolute bombshell. It called Donald Trump a demolition man, saying the US-led order isn't just getting weaker, it's being actively destroyed. So that leads to the really big question. Why? Why is all of this happening right now? To really get what's going on, we can't just skim the headlines. We need a framework. A brutal, ancient framework for how power is won, tested, and ultimately lost. One that was described centuries ago by Machiavelli. See, Machiavelli laid out this predictable cycle. First, a leader builds an order. Then, he starts to test its limits, push the boundaries. Then, and this is the critical part, he starts to destabilize that very same order just to prove his own dominance. And that leads to the final fatal snitch. His allies stop being afraid of him and start planning for a world without him. And let's be perfectly clear. We are in stage 3, the most dangerous stage of them all, the destabilization. This stage, it always looks like total chaos from the outside. You see canceled meetings, public insults, threats that make no sense. But it's not confusion. It's a calculated test. It's Donald Trump pressuring Ukraine, insulting European allies, all to reassert his dominance through fear. But here is the massive, critical flaw in that whole strategy. Machiavelli warns us that fear completely backfires the exact moment your allies realize they have other options. The second they start planning alternatives, the fear you created becomes their very reason to leave you. All right, now let's take this framework and apply it directly. Let's look at the actual words and actions of European leaders at that same conference. This is where the theory gets very, very real. Just listen to France's Emmanuel Macron. He's not up there talking about strengthening the alliance with the US. Nope. He's talking about European strategic autonomy. He's even suggesting they coordinate nuclear deterrence with Germany. So you really have to ask yourself, does that sound like a loyal ally who's trying to patch up a relationship? Or does it sound like an ally who is actively preparing to replace the leader? This is stage 4, the final stage, beginning to bleed into stage 3. And the pattern is it's undeniable when you look at it. Kaja Kallas' public showdown, Volodymyr Zelensky just flat out defying Donald Trump's pressure, Germany's Friedrich Merz explicitly warning of decoupling. These are not separate, isolated incidents. They are coordinated signals that the break, internally, has already happened. And yet somehow the Trump team seems completely blind to all of this. When these exact concerns were brought up, Trump's acting attorney general, Matt Whitaker, just brushed them off as think tank talk. The moderator literally had to remind him, "Sir, this is the German chancellor we're talking about.
It's the classic mistake of a leader who mistakes fear for loyalty and just can't hear the warnings anymore.
So where does all this lead? This destabilization stage, it doesn't last forever. It always forces a realignment. And right now we can see three starkly different and frankly very dangerous paths emerging from all this wreckage.
Path 1. Donald Trump doubles down on his strategy, forcing Europe into an impossible choice and basically fracturing NATO for good. Path 2. Europe hits the gas on its move toward autonomy, building up its own military power, and the US becomes just one powerful country among many. Or Path 3, and this is the most terrifying one. A real crisis erupts over Iran, Ukraine, maybe Taiwan, and these alliances get tested for real in a world that has zero trust left.
And this is it. This is the ultimate miscalculation in Machiavelli's cycle. A leader, so sure of his own dominance, starts a conflict expecting his allies to just fall in line, only to turn around and find himself standing completely and utterly alone. That's isolation disguised as dominance.
Machiavelli had one last warning about this. He said, boldness is a great thing for a leader, but only when it's backed by a crystal clear understanding of reality. The moment your boldness outruns your calculation, that's when fortune turns against you.
And fortune, it rarely announces that it's leaving. It reveals itself in these subtle signs, the very signs we just saw in Munich. Empty chairs where your allies are supposed to be, private whispers that suddenly become public fights, and allies who don't talk about partnership anymore, but start talking about independence. So the real question isn't just about what happened in Munich. It's about what that single moment represents. Are we just watching the chaotic destruction of an old world order? Or are we witnessing the violent birth of a new, much harsher one? And maybe the most unsettling question of all, which side of that historic shift are we already standing on?